Excuse me.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Halloween Addicts Anonymous. This month, our project is called The Jacks Are Wild. And this piece was created on a scrap piece of wood that I had in my stash. It measures 6 inches by 12 inches by an eighth of an inch. And you can order it from me, but really this design is really easily adaptable to any rectangular surface you have. You may have a tray or a framed piece that will work really well for this design. Anyway, I just wanted to use up this piece of scrap that I had, and so I came up with this design. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to decoupage some tissue paper. You know how much I love to do that to the background. And we're going to use this postcard tissue paper that I found recently. I really love it because of the coloring. It's brown, it's not black. So it lends itself well to a background treatment. And so we are going to get out some DecoArt decoupage medium, use the matte. You could also use Mod Podge, but I prefer DecoArt decoupage medium. And because this is tissue paper, you're not going to need to apply a lot of decoupage medium to the surface to get it to adhere. If you do happen to use too much decoupage medium, you won't be able to apply your pattern very easily. And if that happens, all you need to do is take your sander and just sand it a little bit to rough up the surface. So I'm going to get out an old brush and my decoupage medium, and I'll be back. All right, so I got out my decoupage medium and an old brush. Now, I use decoupage medium a lot. If you've painted with me at all, you know that. And so I like to keep mine in this stainless steel canister that has an airtight lid. That way it's easier for me to get to, and I don't waste as much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, and I'm going to apply just a nice thin coat of decoupage medium, a couple inches down on this surface. And then I'm going to apply my tissue paper and just flatten it out. I got some wrinkles. That's okay. That adds interest. Wrinkles are fine. And I'm not just saying that because I have wrinkles. I'm going to move this over here, out of the way here. So then I'm just going to come back and add another couple of inches of decoupage medium. And some more wrinkles. Wrinkles are your friend. Unlike the ones that come on your face, wrinkles in your decoupage tissue for your background are not a bad thing. Let's get this going. So I always like to do it this way in sections, because that way my decoupage isn't dried out by the time I get it ready to put the tissue on. Okay, closer by the minute. Slowly but surely. And the last little section, and we'll be ready to dry this and get rid of the excess around the edges. All right, that looks good. All right, gonna put my decoupage away. I'm going to dry this, then I'll come back and show you how I like to remove the excess from around the edges. Okay, decoupage is dry. So now what I like to do is to take a nail file or an emery board, or you can even use your sanding block or sanding disc. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go along the edges and just file the excess off. That gives me a nice clean edge. And this works really well, even on curves. So, easier than trying to cut paper to fit. I did see videos where you can kind of burn this off, but me and fire, we don't get along. So I just prefer to do this. All right. So now, one of the next things you want to do is you want to apply the pattern for the pumpkins. So I'm going to do that, and then I will be back. One of the first things that I want to do is I want to float some shading on the background around these pumpkins. And now you'll notice I just put the pattern on for the pumpkins and the stems, and where their facial features were, I just carried those lines straight through those facial features because I like to put them on the sections so I can kind of base in the pumpkin with shape following strokes. So, but our first task is going to be float some shading on the background, around the pumpkins, around the stems, and then around the outside edge. This paper, you're going to see a water line, but when it dries, it goes away. So don't worry about that too much. I always like to do this background shading before I base things in. It's just a little easier. I don't have to be quite as careful. But sometimes when I'm teaching classes, it's easier to have things based in. So that's why on like convention classes or classes that I teach, I'll have you do some base coating before the shading. But 9 times out of 10, I like to do it before I've based in anything. Doesn't have to be perfect float, which some of you are going, yay, because floating sometimes isn't the most pleasant thing to do. But you can see already, even the shading around the pumpkins is helping to drop that tissue paper into the background a little bit more. We want it there, we want to be able to see it, but we don't want it to be the star. So just continue floating around these pumpkins and their stems. See, all the way down there. Sometimes you have to look a little harder to find the pattern line. This guy has a giant stem. It's a big stem for a teeny tiny pumpkin. This would look cute on a tray or, like I said, a framed board. All right, so I've gone all the way around the pumpkins. So now I'm going to go all the way around the outside edge. That just ages my paper a little bit, and again adds to dropping that paper design into the background a little bit more. Doesn't have to be a neat float. Gone are the days of me trying to get the perfect float. almost there. All right. Looking good already. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add some more interest to the background with the Punchinello. And so I'm going to get out my piece of Punchinello, and we're going to be doing that with burnt umber and with warm white. So you want to get out your favorite stencil brush, some warm white. So I like to use the Chris Hoy's stencil brushes. Looks like I should have cleaned this one out. But I'm going to take my Punchinello, and I use this a lot in my backgrounds. And if you've painted with me, you know that. So I'm going to just stencil some random clusters of burnt umber dots on the background. And this just adds some more interest to the background. We don't have a lot of open area, but enough that this will show up. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's enough of that color. So now I'm going to do the same thing with some warm white. And I'm using my dirty brush, so it's going to look a little like a little tinted brown, but it'll be okay. And here again, it's not going to be really, really noticeable, but it's there and it adds interest. Some places it'll stand out more than others. Okay, let me see. Any place else I want to put this? I think a little down there. Looks good to me. So you can wash out your stencil brush. So the next thing we want to do is we want to base in our pumpkins. And I've numbered them on your pattern. So we're going to base in pumpkin number 1 here. And that's going to be based in with burnt orange. So get out some burnt orange. And let's base in our number 1 pumpkin. And 1 coat too, if you don't add water to your base coat. And I rarely add water to a base coat. You're going to still be able to see a little bit of that background tissue through there, but that's perfectly fine. So just quick base coat. And 1 more little section here. You can see the wrinkles. I like that. All right, so pumpkin number 1 is based with burnt umber. This is pumpkin number 2, and he's going to be based with jack-o'-lantern orange, which is a color that we don't use too often anymore. Which is why I have to shake it so much. So let's base that guy in, and this is a little more see-through. So you're going to see more of that background tissue than you did with the burnt orange. But that's all right, don't panic. We have a lot of stuff that goes on top of it. I do sell this background tissue on my website, and one piece of it, you could probably do 3 or 4 of these surfaces. All right. All right, pumpkin number 2 has been based with jack-o'-lantern orange. So pumpkin number 3, the guy in the center, we're going to base him with spiced pumpkin. So, using 3 different oranges, just trying to get a little bit of different value on each pumpkin. Okay. I actually love the look of the tissue paper coming through. Now, if you didn't want to see the tissue paper through it, you could always base coat it twice. With your first base coat, you could add a little bit of, say, light buttermilk or something to make it more opaque. So once I get this based in, I'm going to dry it, and then we'll start coming in and doing some highlighting and shading and dry brushing. Okay, cool. Got our pumpkins based in. So I'm going to hit this with a hair dryer or my heated gun, and I will be back and we'll start adding some shading and highlighting to these guys. All right, so these are dry. On my darker pumpkin, I just wanted to go in and add the lines for this separation in the sections. All 3 of these pumpkins are going to be highlighted with the same color, which is moon yellow. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to come in and dry brush through the center of each section with some moon yellow. So I'm just taking each section as its own little part. And so this section here is whiter, so this dry brush is going to be whiter. And just a little bit, if you can get in there with your dry brush. And even though I'm using the same color, it shows up a little bit differently over each base coat. So we just want to do this to start adding some dimension to our pumpkins, so they just don't look like they're flat. All right, last one. Cool. Right, so you can wash out your dry brush. We do come back and dry brush a little bit brighter highlight, but we can do that after we do our highlighting and shading. So now what we want to do is we want to float some highlights on our pumpkins with moon yellow. So just a regular side load float. And I'm going to start at the outside and work my way in. That way I don't wipe out any of my floats. Now this goes on very, very bright, but as it dries, it tones down. So don't panic. So I'm just doing the outside edges of each section. And these sections are actually called flutes. And now I can go to the other side of this one. Start on the outside so you don't wipe out any floats. We'll go down here to the bottom. All right, move on to pumpkin number 3. And the same thing, outside edges of each section. So this is the same on all 3 pumpkins. Oops, outside edge. Okay, might as well, while I'm upside down, go ahead and do this side. And just a couple more sections and we'll have this part done. All right, so we are going to float some shading on our pumpkins. We're going to start with pumpkin number 1. And he's going to be shaded with Heritage Brick. And that's going to be the first shade on him. I know there are several places that we float shading on these pumpkins. I'm going to go first on either side of the center section of the pumpkin, so it's like a back-to-back float. Turn this over. And we'll do this float right here. Now what I want to do is I want to float shading in the top and the bottom of each section. So we still treat each section like it's its own little area. And yes, it is going to go over some of those highlights that you just did, but it'll be okay. So I'm going to start a little ways down in this part and then come across the top and come down a little ways on the other side. A little too much paint on there, but it'll be okay. I can blend it out. And I'm going to do the same thing in the bottom. So I'm going to come up this, oops, I guess I could be on camera. I'm going to come up the side a little ways and then come across the bottom. When I get to this area, this little V area here, I want to walk that color up a little bit just to give that a little bit more of the look of roundness in there. Again, I'm going to start a ways up on the sides of the center and come across the bottom. And this little tiny section gets across the bottom. Now I'm going to get this with my heated craft gun, just to dry it. And then what I want to do is I want to float on the pumpkin, on pumpkin number 1 next to pumpkin number 3. To separate those two pumpkins from each other a little bit. And we will come back and darken this area. So don't try to get it dark all at once. All right, so that's the first shading on pumpkin number 1. On pumpkin number 2 and 3, the shading is going to be done with country red. So get out a little bit of country red. Get the little goobers off the top of my bottle. So, in the very same way that we shaded this first pumpkin, we're going to shade the other 2 with country red. So I'm going to go and shade next to the center section first on both of them. And usually what I do on pumpkins is my first shading is always with a red. This one was with Heritage Brick, but usually it's with a red. And Heritage Brick is kind of red. It's just more muted. On this one, I'm going to go ahead and do the float to separate the pumpkins together. Not together, to separate them. You can't separate them together. just to separate them from each other. And then I'm going to come in and do that other side. All right, so now we can go back and we can float the shading in the top and the bottom of each of those pumpkins. So here again, I'm going to start a little ways down the side, come across the top, kind of walking that color down a little bit. Oh, that looks really nice on that spice pumpkin. And I'm going to do the same thing in the bottom of that pumpkin. Start a little ways up the side. And let's turn this so I can get this other side. And let's do our last one. Flip my brush, almost did it the wrong way. And let's get the bottom done. Okay. Awesome. So now we want these floats to dry, and we're going to come back and we're going to float shading again, but this time on all three pumpkins it's going to be with burnt umber. So I'm going to dry this real quick. All right, and you already have burnt umber out on your palette. So let's just regular side load float. And everything you did with the reds, you're going to do with the burnt umber. So I'm going to come in here and float to separate the sections. And this time I can do this on all three of them. That way it can dry on the first one while I'm working on the other two. Need a little bit more paint, I think. Yeah, that's better. All right. Keep wanting to stick my brush into some other color. Not gonna work. So you got that first one done. So now we'll go back to pumpkin number 1 and we'll start doing the shading in the top and the bottom of that pumpkin. Again, this is all with burnt umber. I'm going to do here. Then I'll do here. Looks a little better for me. And we'll do the bottoms. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next pumpkin. I really like that. It's nice, rich looking. I'm going to go ahead and go over here. As long as I'm doing it this way, then I'll turn it over and do the bottoms at the same time. All right, time to do the bottoms. I always like to say I do the burnt umber because pumpkins are always kind of dirty. Although I did learn something. If you're going to display pumpkins, real pumpkins outside, what you want to do is you want to give them a bath in Clorox first. And that's going to help keep them from rotting right away. And then you can take any kind of furniture polish or floor wax and just kind of wax them up and make them shiny. And they look so nice. Of course, have I done that to mine yet? No. Do I have a rotten pumpkin out front? Yes. So when I get the pumpkins to replace that one, oops, sorry about that. They will be getting their Clorox bath and some polish. So there, if you learn anything at all from this project, it was how to keep your pumpkins from rotting. Right, I need to come in and do the shades to separate the two pumpkins from the front pumpkin. So that's just another float of burnt umber. Look how that set that pumpkin back nicely. Okay, so highlighting and shading is almost done. We need to come back and do a little bit brighter highlight on our pumpkins with warm white. And that's just going to go in the tops and a little bit in the bottom, but not the whole complete length of each section. So warm white. And I'm just going to go up here in the top, here. And I'll do a little bit down in the bottom of those two sections. This section is in the dark area, so I really don't want to highlight it. I'm going to Do the same thing here. And that just kind of adds a little bit more dimension to your pumpkin. Now I know these are not technically correct pumpkins, but we still need a little bit of dimension. Okay. All right, I'm going to call that done. So the next thing we want to do is we want to apply the pattern for the facial features. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back. All right, so we're going to base in these facial features with lamp black. You can use a round brush, a liner, a flat brush, whatever is easiest for you. Today it seems there is no easy brush for me. This one is a round. And if you want to change the expressions on your pumpkins, go right ahead. I just tried to make them look crazy and wild. I'm going to get out the liner. I have a little bit better control. I like to think I have better control. We have yet to see. Oh, much nicer for me. So they'll start to get some character now. Again, this is a part where you stop it, pause it, fast forward. Because it's just your basic base coating. Right. He looks a little creepy already. So, I used to carve pumpkins when my kids were little. Not so much anymore. This is the only way I carve pumpkins. I don't trust myself with a knife. There was this accident with an avocado. You want to get out of cooking, just stab yourself with a knife when you're slicing the avocado. The kids panic and they don't let you cook anymore. Now you notice I'm going to fill in the whole mouth, and I'll come back later and add his teeth. Okay. And I also ignored where the iris is on the eyes, because it's just easier to base the eye in completely and then come back and add the iris over top. Okay, slowly but surely, these guys are getting their faces. I am going to base around this tongue. Bet you didn't know pumpkins had tongues. This guy does. All right, so I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll work on getting the details on these facial features. All right, one of the first things we're going to do to these eyes and nose and mouth is we're going to dry brush a little bit of warm white in each one, just to break up that darkness. Don't worry, it has an iris over it, so it'll be okay. It's going to look a little creepy for a while. All right. Okay, so we have that highlighting dry brushed in there. So now one of the things we want to do is we want to line the cut edge, or what I'm calling the cut edge, of each facial feature. And that's just done with your liner brush and moon yellow. Okay, I'm going to get a better liner brush. And no water. You don't need any water in your brush. Just pick up some moon yellow. And let's see, I kind of flattened the brush out so it has kind of a square tip. I'm going to start in the top and just pull down the side. If it runs out of paint a little bit, that's fine. just going to line what I'm going to call the cut edge. And then the mouth gets it too. I don't know, it kind of adds to the character a little bit. So I'm going to go next to each of these teeth and across the bottom. And I'm not real careful about it. And let's go to the next guy. Now his, I lined the inside edges. I mean, the right side, not inside. The right side. And I'm going to go here. And then this guy's going to get on the right side also. And this one in his mouth, it's going to come on the other side of the tongue a little bit too. The next thing you want to do is you want to paint in the irises with Moody Blue. And so I'm just, you can go ahead and put the pattern on if you'd like. I'm just going to eyeball it here. How appropriate. I'm going to eyeball the eyeball. And on this guy, one eye is definitely larger than the other, including the iris. This one has pretty big irises. And we have some highlighting and shading to add to these. As always. I actually think this guy is my favorite. Is it okay to play favorites? So then we're going to come back and we're going to add pupils. And those are added with lamp black. So I'm going to give this guy some nice oval pupils. And this one's pupils are a little cockeyed. Just to add some character. They're starting to come alive now. All right. So we are going to line some highlighting on these irises. And that's going to be done with Moody Blue on your liner brush, plus some warm white for a lighter value of Moody Blue. And this is all going to just get lined in the left side of each iris. So I'm just going to line a little bit lighter blue in the left side of each eye. Just brightens them up a little bit. And then we're going to get out some true blue, just a touch, and we're going to line some shading in those irises. And that's going to go on the right side. Don't need very much. So the right side is going to get some true blue. So just a few lines just to give that side a little bit darker color. So there's warm white highlights. And that involves straight warm white in your liner brush. You're going to line just a little bit brighter highlight on that left side, not a lot. And then you're also going to come and you're going to set down the highlight. It can be a dot or a little oval. And that's going to be in the tops of the pupils. Cool. Now they have eyes. Now I want to come back with my flat brush and I want to float just a little bit of shading on those cut edges. So I'm going to pick up just a touch of burnt umber. I'm just going to tuck some burnt umber shading at the top and the bottom of each of those little cut edges that we did. Doesn't take much. You're just sticking the corner of your brush down. And that changes the look of those a little bit. Just couldn't leave them alone, you know. All right. We are going to line some shadows above each eye, and we're going to do that with our liner brush and thin down burnt umber. So I want to just get some liner consistency burnt umber. And I'm going to, I think you can see, line a shadow above this eye. This eye, I'm going to give him some eyebrows. This one, I'm going to line a shadow just on the left side of the eyes, the nose, and the mouth is going to go down along the bottom. The pumpkin number 2 gets eyebrows, and he gets a little shadow to the left of his eyes and underneath his mouth. And that's all done with your liner brush and thin burnt umber. So I'm just going to line that little shadow above each eye. On this one, I'm just going to go to the left side. On his nose too. And I'm also going to go on the left side of this eye. And I'm going to go under his mouth. And here, you can go under the mouth and down and under the tongue. Just to get that out of the way. I need to do under this mouth. So just a quick little line of burnt umber. Oh, I forgot to give him his eyebrows. Let's do that too. He's got some puzzled looking eyebrows. And this guy gets eyebrows too. A little bit darker than just straight thinned. Pick up a little bit more paint so they have a little bit more texture. All right. We're going to float some highlighting on these facial features. And that's going to be done with Moon Yellow. So pry open your Moon Yellow. And I'm going to float a highlight on the right side of this guy's eyes. It goes a little bit into that shadow that you did. And I'm also going to go above the mouth. Oops. And in the very tip of each little tooth. Again, this goes on bright, but it tones down. So on this, the center guy, I'm going to go to the right side of each eye. And the right side of his nose. And I'm going to go across the top of his mouth. Just a nice little float of Moon Yellow. This guy, you're going to go across the top of his eyes, and it goes a little past where the eye stops, okay? So you want to carry that lid out a little bit. And then I'm also going to go above his mouth. Right, really starting to come to life. They also need some little cheeks. And we are going to give them each some cheeks with a dry brush of Country Red. You might want to add just a touch of warm white to it. So bust open your Country Red, pick up just a touch of warm white to lighten it a little bit. And we're going to go through and just give them a couple little cheeks. This guy's little cheeks are just right on the end of their smiles. Now I do want to go in on this center guy, and I want to add some little stirrups with lamp black onto his smile. So I'm just going to come here and just give him some little stirrups. I can darken this where I did the cheeks a little bit. All right, cool. We're getting there. So now you want to go back and you want to put the pattern on for the center pumpkin's teeth and his cigarette. So let's do that real quick. See if I can do it without smudging those stirrups I put on just now. So he just has a couple little teeth. If you want to give him more, that's fine. And he has this little cigarette. So we're going to paint those with warm white. You can still get in yours. That's great. Just going to give him a couple little teeth. They don't have to be opaque. You want to give them more teeth? That's perfectly fine. And then I'm also going to base in his cigarette. And I just base it in up to that cut edge. All right. So we want those to dry. So while those dry, we can go ahead and base in our pumpkin number 2's tongue with country red. So one coat will do. Okay. And we can go over here and base in our little spider guy with lamp black. Now while he's wet, you can pick up some Moody Blue and just line a little highlight across his back and his head. So the teeth, they should be dry enough by now. We are going to take a little side load float of lamp black. We want to blend it out quite a bit. And we're just going to float lamp black across the top of each tooth. That sticks him in his mouth. The cigarette, we are going to float some shading with burnt umber, and we're going to line some shading with burnt umber. So side load, just a tiny side load of burnt umber. And I'm going to float across the top of the cigarette and across the bottom. And basically, you just kind of dirty that cigarette up a little bit. Then I'm going to take my liner brush. I'm going to tap in on the tip of the cigarette. I'm going to tap in yellow, moon yellow. I'm going to go ahead and tap in the whole round end of the cigarette. Then just wipe that brush out. Pick up a little country red and tap in the bottom half. And if they kind of blend together, that's okay. I'm just going to tap in some red. Then what I want to do is I want to come back with my liner brush and some thinned burnt umber. And I'm just going to line some little creases in this cigarette. And I also want to line this little edge next to where the cigarette is lit. So it doesn't take too much. I also want to come in with a little bit of warm white in my liner brush and just line some lighter spots to make it look a little rounder. Okay, let's go to our little spider. We'll come back and dry brush the smoke in a little bit. On our spider, we want to thin down some lamp black, and we want to give him antenna. It's a weird spider. It has antenna. And we also want to give him some little legs. So I'm just going to line some little antenna. And then I also want to give him some little legs. We'll go back to the tongue over here. And we are going to dry brush some highlighting on the tongue with country red plus warm white. Kind of the same color you did the cheeks with. So I'm going to treat the tongue like it's divided into sections, like it has that line down the center. And then I'm going to wipe my brush out pretty good and just pick up some more warm white. And I'm going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlighting, kind of just in the tops of those, the humpy part. It's a technical term, really. And on the end. Then I can wash out my dry brush. I am going to come in and float shading on the tongue with burnt umber. And that's going to go along the back side here and the lower edge all the way to the tip. And then I'm going to go in the center to make that center crease. Now that doesn't go all the way to the end. And then I do want to touch just a little bit of shading across this top right here. And that got to be more than I wanted, but it'll be okay. That's why God gave you fingers. All right. Now I could even go a little bit brighter with that highlight, but I'm going to wait for a little bit. So let's give our spider guy a little eye. And all I did was I painted a little white eye. And then I gave, oops, I guess I could have him over there, a little white eye. And then I just took my liner brush and dotted a little black pupil in there. All right. So let's go ahead and base in our stems with a new color we haven't had on the palette. We are going to base that in with Irish Moss. So all three stems get based in with Irish Moss. One coat will do. Let's get this guy. He's got a short little stem. And then there we go. And this one's got a medium-sized stem. So we'll let those dry. And while we do that, we'll come back with our dry brush and some warm white. And we're just going to give him a little bit of smoke coming from his cigarette. So I'm just going to dry brush some smoke. And one other thing I want to do is I want to deepen the shading on the two outside pumpkins next to the front pumpkin. So I'm going to do that with a float of burnt umber, but I'm also going to pick up just a touch of lamp black to deepen that a little bit. It doesn't take much. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to refloat right next to these guys, just to drop them behind that center pumpkin even a little bit more. When I get down here, I'm going to walk that color across, even up here a little bit. And that's just going to drop them behind the center pumpkin a little bit more. And the same thing's going to go over here. Just to pop that center pumpkin forward a little bit. Now our stems, what we're going to do with the stems is we are going to float a highlight on them with moon yellow. And I'm going to do the float on the top edge and the right side. So I'm just going to pull a float of moon yellow on these guys across the top and down the right side. Again, looks pretty bright, but it'll be okay. And then what I want to do is I want to take a liner brush with some moon yellow. Much like we did the cut edges, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to streak some moon yellow, highlighting to give this pumpkin some ridges. So think like a stem. They're not nice and flat. They have ridges. And they don't have to all be the same length. Let's try that just a little bit. And we are going to float some shading, and that's going to be on the left side and across the bottom with burnt umber. So I'm going to come down here. That's going to change the look of that green a whole lot. I'm going to go across the bottom. Step left side and across the bottom next to the pumpkin. That's a pretty ragged float. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then what I want to do is I want to do the same thing that I did with that yellow, but I'm going to do it with burnt umber. And this time I'm going to pull from the bottom up. And if it runs into those yellow ones, that's okay. But I just want to give it some creases and lines to make it look like it's not smooth. All right. Now I want to do one last thing to these stems. I'm going to pick up some warm white on my liner brush, and I'm just going to line some light little strokes just kind of across the top and the right side a little bit. Just to highlight them just a little bit more. All right, let's get to the grass. I'm going to back up a little bit for that. The grass is just done with Irish moss, evergreen, and moon yellow. So I know here's my evergreen, so I want to get out some evergreen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double load my flat brush. I'm going to load it with evergreen, and then I'm going to tip one corner with Irish moss. So I have both colors. And with the lighter color up, I'm just going to start, and I'm working on the chisel edge. I'm just going to start setting down and pulling some little bits of grass. You can reload as often as you need to. It's a lot of grass, so try not to make it all the same length or direction. Basically, you just kind of set it down, and if you want it longer, you pull it up a little bit. But I'm just going to go through here and set down some grass along the bottom. Because they have to be sitting somewhere. And grass is my first choice. And you want to fill up that bottom edge quite a bit. I like his tongue, so I didn't cover it up with grass. Actually finding that pulling down, setting down and pulled down works a little bit better. So I'm going to dry this a little bit. Not quite done with the grass yet. I want to kind of ground this grass, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to come in with a side load float of evergreen across the bottom, just to give that grass some place to sit. Evergreen's a pretty transparent color, so it works pretty well for this. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to stroke on some lighter strands of grass. So I am going to go into Irish moss and then side load the other side with moon yellow. And I'm just going to pull some lighter blades of grass. That helps a lot to give you the look you want. Try not to line them up like little soldiers. And that was Irish moss and moon yellow to give you this lighter blades of grass. All right. Cool. I'm going to call the grass done. So now, you have the pattern for the lettering. And if you didn't get the stencil, it's fairly easy lettering to base in. But, of course, the stencil makes it so much easier. And I am going to try to center this on my piece a little bit. And a little bit more that way. All right. And with a stencil brush in lamp black, I'm going to add the lettering to my piece. My nose is itchy. So I love doing stencils for the lettering. Makes it go fast. By the time we're done painting the design, we don't feel like doing lettering most of the time. At least that's what I gather from classes, because I'll do the lettering when I get home. Need a little bit more lamp black. I'm almost out. All right, quick and easy lettering. Now, something I always do when I use a stencil for lettering is I like to go in and fill in those bridges so it doesn't look like it was stenciled. It really doesn't take that long, and it makes it look like you painted it. So I just fill in the little bridges. And then everybody thinks, oh my gosh, you did a great job on that lettering. So it's just a little trick to make your piece look more finished. Now some pieces it's okay, you can leave the bridges open, but for the most part I always do this. I just like to make the lettering look a little more finished. All right. So we just have a couple more things to do, and one of them is to our lettering. We're going to take our liner brush and some Moody Blue. You don't need to add any water to it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to line a little bit of Moody Blue in the top half of each letter. It's kind of dry brushed with your liner brush, just to add some interest to that lettering. And this is something I do to almost every set of letters I do, is I like to just kind of brighten them up and add some more interest to them. So it's not just the backgrounds that I add interest to. Okay, we're getting there. Just a couple more things and we will be done with this project. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to line a shadow on the background to the top and left of each letter. And I think you can see that here. And that's going to be done with thinned burnt umber. So just thin down a little bit of burnt umber. use your liner brush, and wherever there's a top or a left side, you want to line this shadow just to give the letters a little more dimension. What's nice is your letters are black, so if you get on them with this brown, it doesn't really show. And this goes pretty quick, because you're not basing in the whole letter. You're just adding some lines here and there. And this even goes over anything that's below it, so like the stems. Last word. Yay. Almost had enough in my pile. So, we have one more thing to do to this. I need to grab a stamp pad to do that, so I'll be right back. All right, so what I want to do is I want to burnish the edges of this piece with my stamp pad. And it's jet black. It's a StazOn jet black permanent ink. And so what I want to do is I just want to finish off this edge by running my stamp pad, and the more I lean it in towards, flatten it a little bit, the better the burnishing goes. So if you don't have an ink pad, you could do this with your finger in lamp black, just by running your finger along the edge. So just load your finger with some lamp black and just run it along the edge there. It's just as easy, but I had a stamp pad sitting in front of me, and so I went ahead and did it that way as opposed to loading my finger. So I'm just going to burnish these edges with that lamp black or with this jet black stamp pad. And this just kind of finishes off the edges nice. So in the corners here, I want to add a little bit more, kind of round them a little bit. All right, so there you go. I'm going to call this guy complete. I don't know what I did there, but oh well, it'll be just fine. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to having another project ready for you for the month of November. As always, supplies for this piece can be found on my website, which is www.justfinedesigns.com, and there's a special page for Halloween Addicts Anonymous. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.